Hey everyone, welcome back to the Melek'le Yemek channel. Today's recipe is a real treat. We're making homemade tulum cheese from scratch with natural ingredients like the yeast and milk, all organic and fresh. It's the true original recipe made just like we would in our homes, and I'll show you how to make it super simple and easy. So let's dive right in. Of course, the main ingredient we need to make our cheese is fresh raw milk. I've got 20 liters of fresh milk from the local farm delivered straight to our door. Now you can use cow's milk, but if you have sheep or goat's milk, you can mix those in, or just use sheep milk if that's what you have. Traditionally, tulum cheese is made from small ruminants like sheep, but these days it's harder to find their milk since the number of small livestock has been decreasing. So for today we're going with cow's milk. We're heating it up on the stove and we need to keep an eye on it, stirring it continuously. Once it reaches 35 degrees Celsius, we'll remove it from the heat. In the summer, the ideal temperature for the yeast can go as low as 30 degrees Celsius, but in the winter it can even rise to 37 degrees Celsius, or in some cases up to 40 degrees Celsius. Right now though, I'm fermenting it at 35 degrees Celsius, which is the perfect middle ground. The weather is a bit chilly, like spring, not quite summer, but not really winter either, so 35 degrees Celsius is the sweet spot. We're keeping a close watch on it since we're making tulum cheese from raw milk. For this, I'm using 1 cup of the 20 liters of milk for every cup of homemade rennet. If you're wondering, I've got a recipe for the rennet on my channel with a few different variations you can try. So I add the rennet into the milk and stir it well. After mixing it properly, I cover it and let it sit for 45 minutes. If the cheese has set after 45 minutes, I'll cut it, but if it hasn't set yet, I'll let it sit for a bit longer. The waiting time can vary anywhere from 1 hour to 3 hours depending on how strong your rennet is. If it's really powerful, it'll set quickly, but if it's a bit weaker, it might take longer. If you don't have homemade rennet and are using store-bought yeast, just use 1 tablespoon of yeast for every 20 liters of milk, and that will be enough. Now, let's check. After 45 minutes, my milk has set beautifully. To check if it's fully set, I press my fingers gently on the surface of the milk, and if it's just the yellow part coming up, it's a good sign. Another test is to dip a spoon straight in, and if no milk sticks to it, that means it's properly set. You can also check by lifting the edge of the mixture in the pot, and if it comes off in a jelly-like consistency like yogurt, that means it's perfectly set. Once the milk is like this, we know the rennet has worked and the milk is ready. Now I'm going to cut the curd into small pieces. If you like, you can even use a small whisk to help with this step. Look at how beautifully it's set. I just want to show you how it holds together in clumps. Remember, we used fresh raw milk and our homemade rennet that we've been using for years. Honestly, once you get the main concept of making cheese, it becomes super simple. After mixing it, I let it rest for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, the curd will sink to the bottom and the whey will stay on top. At the end of the 10 minutes, this is what it should look like. This will make it easier to strain the curd. So I start removing the whey from the top. Once I get closer to the curd, I place a strainer on top to help drain the rest, and then I gently scoop it up. Once it's about halfway done, I transfer the cheese into cheese bags. I ended up using 2 bags, and from 20 liters of milk, I got about 2 kilos of cheese in the first stage. Now keep in mind, when making the final tulum cheese, the amount might reduce a bit, but don't throw away the whey. It's super valuable. You can use it in dough, soups, cookies, cakes. Basically anywhere you'd use milk or water, you can swap it with whey. I won't show you in this video, but I made some whey cheese lard from it. I have many whey cheese recipes on my channel, so feel free to check them out. Since I've already made those videos, I don't want to repeat them here. Now I'm straining my 2 bags of cheese well to get all the excess liquid out. If you prefer, you can use just 1 bag or even 3 or 4 bags depending on how fast you want the liquid to drain. The fewer bags you use, the faster it'll strain. I've set the bags here and let them drain for about an hour. I try to keep my steps around an hour long to make everything quicker. You can also let it drain for anywhere between 1 to 3 hours and then we'll press the cheese. Don't press it too hard though, just enough to help the whey come out. You can put a maximum of 3 kilos of weight on it. Now that the cheese has released its liquid, I'm going to crumble it into a basin and break it into pieces. I use a knife first to make it easier. Honestly, seeing the result of your hard work is so satisfying and you can feel really proud of what you've accomplished. For me, making cheese isn't something I just do once in a while. I do it all the time, and every time I say, wow, this turned out great, thank God for the blessing. Now our cheese is ready. It's fresh cheese made from raw milk. You don't have to make it into Tulum cheese right away. You can use it however you want. You can melt it down or turn it into regular white cheese. If you like, you can even gently cook it to make things like Marash or Antep-style cheese, or even make a firm cheese for packaging or village-style cheese. This entire process is the foundation for all types of cheese. Now from this point onward, we're going to turn it into Tulum cheese. Those of you who love cheese and follow my channel will probably know this method. Up until here, it's pretty simple, and making Tulum cheese is also simple. It just takes time and of course hygiene. Since we're working with raw milk, let's make sure we focus on cleanliness. Now after I cut and chop the cheese into pieces, I'm going to mash it up really well. Tulum cheese involves a few steps, but if you're short on time and don't want to wait, you can skip some steps. After mashing, you can just salt it, sprinkle some caraway seeds, and directly put it into jars, barrels, or press it into a stone. However, when you press it like that, a lot of whey will come out, and every day you'll need to replace the towels you put over it to absorb the moisture. It'll take a while for the whey to fully drain, and for the cheese to reach its full flavor, it can take anywhere from 3 to 5 months, not just 3. So at first it takes a few days to press, but this extra time actually helps it ripen faster. Now that I've mashed up all the cheese, I'm going to start pressing it into the cheese bags because the liquid has really started to reduce. Once I do this, I press it lightly and then place it in the coolest place in the house, usually the coolest part of the kitchen. I let it sit for a full day without applying any heavy pressure on top, but if you prefer, you can cover it and add a maximum of 3 kilos of weight on top. After this, we don't press it too hard because we want the remaining whey to slowly drain out. If we press too hard, we'll lose the cheese's fats and oils, and we really need those to develop the flavor and aroma of the cheese. After the cheese has sat for a day in a cool place with no heavy weight on it, it has drained its whey and the remaining milk has been removed. What's left is almost just the cheese. Now we're on the final step, breaking it up again. You can tell it's ready because the bag has taken the shape of the cheese. And when I cut it in half, it's like sourdough bread rising. This means it's starting to acidify and develop its flavor. Don't worry, the acidification is actually a good thing. Some followers have mentioned that their cheese got holes in it and asked what they should do. Honestly, that's totally fine. If your cheese has holes, it's just the natural fermentation process. This happens when the cheese rests at room temperature and the natural cultures inside start to activate. If you prefer, you could just let it sit and make a soft cheese like mozzarella or a very soft cheese. But in our case, the cheese is telling us, I'm ready, I've acidified, and I'm now ready to melt into that beautiful texture. After crumbling it and looking at the color change, you can see that the cheese has gone from white to a creamier color, almost like butter. This means it's lost most of the whey and is now rich in fats, ready to develop its final flavor. Now it's time for salting. For the salt, I use 5½ tablespoons of coarse rock salt. If you're using ground salt, you can go for about 6 or 7 tablespoons. Tulum cheese should have a noticeable saltiness. It's not a cheese that should be bland. If I add it in large pieces like this, it takes a while for the salt to dissolve, and sometimes it doesn't even dissolve properly. That's why, at home, as some of my followers know, I crush my spices and salts using a grinder. I grind the coarse salt so it dissolves better. I add the 5½ tablespoons of rock salt into the cheese and mix it well. Don't worry about the color of the cheese bag, it's not dirty. I recently made sour plum juice, so that's the color left from it. The stains will fade as I wash the bag. I use these bags not only for cheese but also to filter fruit juices like date molasses and grape molasses. They're great at holding back the pulp and letting the liquid pass through. After mixing, I press it one more time, putting it into a bag and leave it to rest again for a day in the coolest place of the house. For me, that's usually my balcony, as my kitchen tends to get quite warm. Once I do the final dry pressing, I tightly close the bag and leave it for another day. After a full day, you'll see that only a few drops of liquid will remain. If I feel some oils coming out from the cheese bag, it's a sign that it's time to press the cheese and move on to the next stage. So after 3 days of fermentation, I press it again with a slight weight on top. You don't need to put pressure on it throughout the whole process, but now I want the last bit of liquid to drain completely. I use about 5 kilos of weight on it and leave it for another day. After 1 day, I'll take it out and finish the pressing process. Making Tulum cheese at home is really easy, and as you can see, this is a home-style version. It's not exactly like the original authentic Tulum cheese, but it's a type of homemade cheese you can make with milk from your own kitchen. In the past, I used store-bought cheese rennet, but this time I'm using sure-done sheep stomach rennet to make it. When I was pressing, I noticed some tiny sugar ants around the cheese. It's a bit funny, but we love them, and they come and go as little guests in our kitchen. I'm sure you can see how the cheese is drying out now, and you can feel the shine in my hands. That shine means the fats in the cheese are starting to come out. Those fats haven't been lost. They're still inside the cheese, just slightly oozing out from the edges. Now I'm adding a tablespoon of caraway seeds to the cheese. If you don't like caraway, you can skip it, or you can experiment with other spices like thyme, oregano, or even chia seeds. You can make this cheese in various flavors. Your choices are endless. The spices you add depend on your taste, and you can mix up to 4 or 5 types. It's all up to your preferences. Now, the container I use is a white plastic container typically used by cheesemakers. It's not just any regular kitchen storage container, so I recommend you get one like this if you're planning to make cheese. These containers are heat resistant up to 30 degrees Celsius, so they can handle moderate temperatures without issue. Of course, if used for a long period, it could be harmful, but after a few months, it doesn't cause any problems. I'm not recommending you use these for long-term storage, but for the time being, they're fine. Alternatively, you can press your cheese in glass jars, but I found that I can't achieve the same flavor in glass jars as I do in these plastic containers. Even if I leave it for 3 or 4 months, I can't recreate the same taste in a glass jar. So when I want to make Tulum cheese or certain other cheeses, I've started using these white plastic containers for their taste and efficiency. After pressing the cheese tightly, I make sure to clean the container well, especially the edges, as any leftover cheese can dry and create a strong odor. It also causes visual contamination, so I ensure everything is spotless. Once everything is clean, I cover the top of the container with a kitchen towel. I place this in the refrigerator and change the towel every 3 days. I continue this process until the towel is dry, which usually takes 2 or 3 rounds. After that, you won't need to change the towel anymore. However, if you add salt and caraway seeds from the beginning and press the cheese immediately, the towel may need to be changed up to 5 times because the cheese releases more whey. I also label the containers with dates to keep track, ensuring I know when 3 months have passed so I don't lose track of time. Now I'm putting it away and I'll keep it in the fridge for exactly 3 months. As I mentioned earlier, every 3 days I take it out, remove the towel inside and replace it with a fresh one. By the way, make sure the towel you use hasn't been washed with fabric softener or regular laundry detergent because those strong scents can transfer to the cheese and ruin it. So either use towels you've washed by hand or use kitchen paper towels, but be careful with those too. Even after all that straining, my first towel still came out quite wet. I repeat this process 2 more times. By the 3rd time, I finally get a dry towel. Then I replace it again with another dry towel. Like I said, we keep doing this until we finally get a dry one. After that, there's no need to keep placing towels on top. And during this whole process, the cheese is always stored in the fridge. If your house is naturally cool, or if you want to bury it underground, you can do that too. Or you can keep it in the coolest part of your home. What matters is that the temperature where you're storing your Tulum cheese should never exceed 8 degrees Celsius. It must always be stored below that, whether it's outside or in the fridge. After 3 months in the fridge, I open the cheese. I haven't opened it or checked its flavor or appearance during this time. Now that the towel is dry, I know the cheese is ready. After removing the towel for the last time, there's no need to press the cheese with another towel. We leave it as it is, and that's the final step. Now I'm cutting the container from the sides to remove the cheese easily and in a nice shape. You don't have to cut the container when you press your cheese, and you definitely don't need to break a glass jar. If you accidentally break it, the glass could get into your cheese and you won't be able to eat it. But this is up to you. I decided to cut the container this time. In my previous video a couple of years ago, I took the cheese out with a spoon, but this time I wanted to show you the whole shape of the cheese and how it dried and how delicious it looks. Now I'm removing this yellow layer from the cheese. Of course, we don't throw it away. If it's left to rest for another 4 or 6 months, this layer would slowly turn into mold and it would turn into a moldy cheese. But for now, I'm using this yellow layer in the pies I make in the oven. When I use it in the pan, the smell is a bit too strong for us, but when I bake it in the oven, it becomes very flavorful once it melts. Now I'm cutting it in half with a knife. It's truly amazing, really delicious. When you open the container, you can immediately smell the Tulum cheese. As you can see, it's crumbly. By the way, even if you melt it, it will still melt because we made it from raw milk. The cheese's essence hasn't lost its ability to melt, so it will still melt if you like. Now I placed it on a plate and cut a small piece to place next to it. It's really wonderful. You'll be amazed at what you've made. The result is truly fantastic, and it's an honor for me to share this process with you. Thank you so much for watching, friends. I hope to see you in the next recipes. If you have any questions or anything you didn't understand, feel free to write them in the comments or send me a message on Instagram at the Melek'le account. Goodbye, take care.